Welcome back, everyone, to another episode. Today, we are speaking with Anna Cabrera. Anna is a copywriter, storytelling strategist, ghostwriter, copywriting coach, and author. If you are a budding startup, heading a flourishing company of thousands, or a spirited individual with a vision, if you yearn for messages infused with captivating narratives that inspire, resonate, and truly connect, then Anna is ready to help you make your story a memorable one. Anna, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm delighted to have you. As folks, we will be speaking about the power of words for leaders. But before we get into that conversation, Anna, tell us a little bit about you.
I have been writing for as long as I can remember. When we moved to Canada from the Philippines, I was 9 years old. And one of the buildings that really captivated me was the old newspaper building. I think at the time it was about 100 years old. Not old to some cultures, 100 years old is nothing, but to me that was intense. And I remember looking at that building and going, someday I'm going to write for that company. And I did. I ended up doing it, some 15, 20 years later. I've always loved the written word. I've always loved storytelling. My favorite memories were of my grandfather who would tell me stories, my parents telling me stories. But I think that storytelling, whether you had the same upbringing as I did or not, storytelling captivates. Storytelling doesn't require a degree. Storytelling doesn't require that you are of a higher intellect than someone else. It's not, if you're human, you can tell a story. You can learn how to tell it better. And 20 years in, Enrique, I'm still learning how to tell stories better.
And that's the beauty of a story. It
Mm.
never really stops teaching you. It never, and it doesn't matter through the history how many times it's told. It always adds that human current element to it that changes it. Sometimes it changes it all the way through. And we
Mm-hmm.
also often seen when you put five people in line, and say, "Okay, I'm going to tell you this," and by the time you get it to the end, it's
It's
totally different.
totally different. Yes. And even like you'll notice in our own families, right? You're at the same dinner, you're at the same event. Every single person had a different perspective or experience. So the story is totally, entirely different. And it's the same circumstance, it's the same event, but perception changes that. Emotion, where you are, in the moment that you're experiencing a story, you're telling a story, it changes that too, which is what's so cool about this job. Because it's really, we talk about multiverses a lot, right? With Marvel bringing the multiverse kind of to the forefront of public awareness, but it's so true. We're in our own multiverse. I look back at my own memories and I'm like, is that actually what happened, or is that how I perceive it today? That's what happened.
Yeah, and that's so important. And talking about perception and sometimes the challenges of communications, leaders often grapple with various challenges related to communication and the power of words, and often seek guidance on how to use language effectively to inspire and motivate their team. So, how can a leader inspire and motivate their team through words?
You have to know them. I think we end up in these spaces where there are really intelligent people, really experienced people, but they don't know their own people. They know themselves well. And then they're surprised when they don't make an impact or they don't um, empower or inspire. But that's because you don't know the person that you're talking to. So, my advice always, whether you're a leader, you're a middle manager, or you're just starting out, is to get to know every single person that you want to talk to. One of my mentors had said to me a long time ago, and even at this point, leading a team of 30,000 people, he tries to get to know every single person. You won't be able to really in depth, intimately know everybody, but you spend a few minutes with someone and you have that leader's intuition, you do kind of get a sense of this person's a little bit more formal, this person would appreciate humor, this person might appreciate warmth. Everyone deserves compassion, everyone deserves to be spoken with. Notice I say with and not to, in a way that they recognize, that they feel like they're part of the conversation rather than they're being dictated. They're being told to do something. What I encourage leaders to do is to envelop rather than to be tyrannical, I guess, in what this message that you're trying to say. Sometimes we're so, gung ho about something and we so badly want to be heard. We forget we want to be heard, yes, but we want that person to want to hear us, to want to be part of the narrative rather than to just be kind of a bystander in the story.
Yeah, if there's anything I've learned this week is that relationships focus should never be you. It should always be the other person that you are trying to have a relationship with. And that often is the case in communication. In communication, especially as a leader, it should not be you at the center of that. It should be the other person at the center of that communication. And then you'll see effectiveness come through and efficiency come through because it's going to the right target at the right time with the right pace and all of those things. Now, talking about communicating to someone else, leaders frequently face the need to communicate organizational changes, and they may question how to convey these messages in a way that minimizes resistance and uncertainty. So, what strategies can leaders employ to communicate change effectively?
That is probably one of the most challenging things any communications professional has ever been asked. We're called upon to say things in a way that legally protects us, right? Can't say anything that might be too humorous because you might offend somebody. You can't say anything too informally because then, legal is going to say, you needed to say it this very specific way because someone might have perceived it to be. So I always just go back to, you got to be human. And that sounds so trite. Sometimes like when I say that, they're like, oh, that's such a cop out. What does that mean? Everybody's human. But again, it's talking to one. So here's an organizational change. And Enrico, whenever we say organizational change, more than likely there's a negative connotation to that, right? We don't ever announce happy changes, additions, and say we've got some organizational changes that are coming. Organizational change, I feel like, is just a really diplomatic way of saying, so we're letting some people go. you know, there are some people who are going to have to take other people's responsibilities for potentially less money. So there are ugly things that happen behind this very diplomatic umbrella. So whenever I can, I look at the lowest common denominator. Oh, that's ugly too. But someone who may not have put in as many years or has had as much responsibility, or maybe the lowest paid for now. And I look, how is this going to affect that person? Who is going to be affected the worst? How do I humanize that person? How do I think about how this is going to affect them? If there's any way I can say this gently, if there's any way that I can say this with as much kindness as I can employ, that's typically the way to go. There are people behind me, the people in front of me who will make sure that I am not going to get sued for what I say. There are much smarter people than I that will make sure I'm following policy and guidance. The only thing I can do is to be as kind as possible. And the delivery of anything, any news, that is challenging.
Yeah, and talk about delivering difficult news. sometimes feedback can be considered
Mm,
one of those things
yes.
that it's a challenge, and a lot of leaders really struggle with that. And providing constructive feedback is essential for leadership.
Yes.
It's a skill that's needed. So leaders may wonder how to deliver feedback in a way that promotes growth and improvement without discouraging or
Mhm.
demoralizing team members. So how do leaders give constructive feedback without demotivating their team?
Three things. So the first is a trick that I had learned as a young girl in retail. I learned so much from my time at the mall, 16 years old folding clothes. It's so important. My manager then taught me about the sandwich method. So you've got, hey, Anna, need to pull you aside for a sec. I want to congratulate you on this thing. So she's starting off making me feel good. I do also want to give you some constructive criticism. And then she gives me in between, this is the not so pleasant stuff that I got to address with you. But then she'll end the meeting with one more good thing. It could be a repeat of the first thing or another positive thing that she had seen in my activity and in my work. But I never lost that, this sandwich method of good, bad, good. So you walk in, you feel good. There's a little bit of discomfort, but you walk out and you feel good. Right? I don't think we I don't actually don't know anyone who thrives on making someone feel bad. I mean, I certainly don't want someone to take the sandwich method and go, let me tell you something bad. Here's something good though. But before you go, let me add one more thing that you didn't do that was, that was not so good. So good, bad, good. Second thing, as we all know, is tonality. It's never what you say, it's how you say it. So you could be telling someone something great, but if you have no emotion on your face and you're not really giving any kind of, you know, a positive body language in addition to this congratulatory message, doesn't doesn't come off very well either. And then the third thing, again, I go back to this all the time, is storytelling. So you have someone to whom you have to give not so great feedback. Hey, John, let me share something that I've even come across in my own growth, in my upward trajectory. And it probably would not be a bad idea to make it way worse than what this feedback is that you're delivering. So again, it empowers that person to look at you and go, wow, they went through that. This isn't so bad. And they're where they're at. This isn't so bad. So that storytelling, again, relatability is so, so valuable because it brings someone into your field, into like your aura, whatever it is that you call this. I do this all the time. Hopefully people are seeing this on video so that they know what I'm talking about. But over audio, they're like, what is she talking about? There's something around you. Do you ever notice, Enrique, when you meet some people, they just feel good and they could tell you really bad news and you still feel good. This like an energetic aura. And the quickest way to bring people into that is through relatable stories because you can. You can always find something to um, to kind of magnetize yourself to another person's existence.
Yes, and relatability and trust are so integral to a leader's ability to lead.
Mhm.
Now, trust is foundational to effective leadership, and leaders often they seek advice on how to build trust with their teams through communication.
Mhm.
So, how can leaders build and maintain trust through communication?
Talk. There's not enough talking, especially in this age that we live in where everything is digital. You're slacking people, you're WhatsApping people, you're texting people, you're sometimes you don't even, we live in a hybrid world, right? Where I mean, especially after COVID, I was fortunate enough that my business got bigger because all of a sudden I'm working with people um, in Australia, in Latvia, in Serbia, in the United States, in different parts of Canada. There's a great benefit to that, but on the other side of it is we don't really get to see people. We don't get to touch people. We don't get to smell people even, right? Like all of our senses that are ignited when we are face to face, that's not existent in a digital world. And today I feel like we've just gotten so complacent. Here's our phone. This is how I'm going to communicate. It's hard to trust someone over the phone. It's hard to trust someone even over Zoom. It's a little bit better over Zoom because you can see that person, you can see their facial expressions. But we have to go back into a world where you're having one-on-one conversations and you really legitimately, authentically are trying to get to know that person outside of the skills that they bring to benefit the company. There was one leader I was talking to who he had to, I think, terminate very high ranking official. And he's just broken about this. And everyone else I had talked to was like, well, work is work. There's it's work. It is what it is. It's dog eat dog, right? But he was like, no, come on. He's like, these people spend 60, 70 hours a week with us. They spend more time at work than they do with their family. Of course, they're going to take it personally. Of course, this is going to hurt. Of course, this person who was probably making, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year still has to go home and tell his wife he's lost his job. He's going to have to figure out his finances. He's going to have to figure out what he's going to do the next morning when he doesn't have to get up and get ready to go to work. These are the conversations we need to be having, these experiences, so that we're not so robotic and we're not detached from people. There's a certain level of healthy detachment, obviously, we need when we're in a workplace. You can't get attached to everybody, but trust can't really exist unless you know someone or at least have empathy for that someone.
Absolutely. And it's important because especially when you're talking about connections worldwide,
Mhm.
you cannot really develop a relationship enough to learn how much of that trust factor you will lend right to someone. But you
Mhm.
have to be able to, as a leader, connect with the people that you are wanting to trust you.
Yeah,
And leadership is not so much about them or how you call it, flipping it. Can I trust them? No, they have to trust their leader. So you have
that's
to be
right.
able to do that. Now we talk about worldwide activities and multicultural activities. You bring in this element of inclusivity, right? So inclusive language is increasingly recognized as an important aspect of leadership communication today. So what role does inclusive language play in leadership?
I grapple with this. I feel like every day I'm learning more about what inclusive language is. And it's so, even that term, inclusive language, is so polarizing, right? When I was training to be a writer, when I say training, I mean, I was reading, I was just a reader. I would read a book a day if I could, and I'm talking about like as a young adult, they were shorter books, these 700-page tomes. I'm not getting through those in a day, but I learned how to write based on what I read. And there were certain grammatical rules that I always followed. So, for example, at the time that I was training to be a writer, you couldn't say they when applying it to a singular person. The rule was you would have to say he or she. When you're talking about a child, it's his or her, whatever. And I had been taught that it was grammatically incorrect to use the term they, even though you may not have been aware of the gender identity of whatever the subject was that you were talking about. Whereas today, the word they, out of respect to a community that prefers that or feels more comfortable with that, I have to be conscious not to rely solely on my education, my academic background, obviously at this point, outdated academic background. And I have to be very conscious that I'm speaking to a world that doesn't necessarily fall into the confines of what I believed was right. So when we talk about inclusive language, I'm conscious every day that I'm probably going to mess up. So I have to be open to someone giving me the feedback and saying, what you said was divisive. What you said didn't include. What you said didn't respect diversity. And sometimes I take for granted that because I'm a woman and a woman of color and an immigrant, I will be honest, sometimes I feel like that gives me a pass that, oh, hey, well, you look like that, so you must be an ally, or you have to be an ally. You have to speak for those who are marginalized, those who don't have a voice. But I mess up all the time too. And I don't know. I honestly don't know what inclusive language means, because you are bound to hurt someone who doesn't agree with the language that you've used. Someone doesn't want me to use the term they, them, but someone needs me to use the terms they, then. That as just an example of inclusive language.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful because we truly don't know the totality of a person when we're speaking. So you just have to be conscious that they're human, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you treat everybody from the leader's perspective with dignity and respect, if you can just iron those two to your leadership daily activity, I think that you will come out okay.
Mm,
You know,
I
the
hope
the
so.
language will be, maybe displaced at one point or another, but treat them
Yeah,
with dignity and respect, and I think you'll have a 90%
for
efficiency
sure.
rate.
And even to those who may not be communicators like you and I are, or writers, this world has a multitude of languages, right? And some languages don't have a feminine, masculine pronoun, or like they don't like Filipino. I don't think we have feminine, masculine. French, la, le, you know, Spanish, the romantic languages. So sometimes when someone's talking, they don't mean to offend, but what they said translated into English, that's that's just how it translates. They don't they don't mean anything by it. So I think if we are less quick to be offended, we might be less quick to offend.
That's correct. Now, folks, we could talk about communication, how to be effective, how to be efficient, pretty much all day long.
Mm.
But we want to give you, Anna, an opportunity to share with us what do you have coming up, and how can people get a hold of you if they wanted to speak with you or have them or have you speak for them?
Oh, thank you for that opportunity. They can get a hold of me through you, Enrique. I'm on LinkedIn. It's the one social platform that I am comfortable in. I'm so thankful to have met so many professionals around the world. And I learn from other storytellers too. I learn from other writers. If someone is interested in having a conversation with me, that's the first step, is a conversation. I'm not for everyone. No one's for everyone, and not everyone is for me. So I would ask everyone, actually, when they're looking for a creative, whether it's a writer or a graphic designer, it's you may have to go through several of them. It's like the frog prince, right? You have to kiss a bunch of frogs before you find your prince. It's the same thing, because it is an art form. What we do, what I do, the way that I write might resonate with somebody, and they might really love it and want it for their own brand. I do try to speak in the voice of the clients, for who I represent, But at the end of the day, I have my limitations as well. I I can't sound like a scientist. I can't sound like a car manufacturer. I can do what I can to take someone's know-how and apply it for the layperson. It's a bit of a specialty. Um, but I think to be able to connect with any partner is the most important thing. So, not to sell myself, what I'd like to sell is the general writer, the generalist to look for different folks, to look for different talents, to look for different skills and make sure that it aligns with you. One of the things that I'm really excited about is in September, I started with an organization called CSGA, Cybersecurity Global Alliance. I was talking to the CAO yesterday, and she and I were both laughing about the fact that we feel completely useless when it comes to talking about cyber defense the way that our peers do. We've got partners with us that are just magnificent, experience with the FBI and Interpol and Secret Service and different police services, and are magnificent at explaining the technicalities and the engineering and the architecture of cyber defense. What I'm really excited about is to help bring that story to the forefront and to be able to talk to the average person who doesn't get up in the morning and think about cybersecurity and cyber defense and how to protect themselves. So for me, my next year and hopefully onward is discovering this new arena for myself to be able to tell the story of something that I am learning myself, which I think is really cool because we can tell stories about things that we know really well, but there's that 5-year-old fascination. Remember when your kids were 5 and everything's brand new and they're learning about everything and they come home and they're like, Daddy, I gotta tell you about this tree that I found, right? I think the most exciting thing about storytelling is that the discovery of everything new means 1,000 different stories. I just think that is so cool. And it's something that everybody can have, whether you have a writer on your team or not. Wake up every single freaking morning. Go, what new thing can I discover today? You'll look for it. You don't even have to look for it. It's they're there. You just have to have that awareness that it's there.
Absolutely. Now, folks, we'll have that as part the way to contact and as part of the show notes and video for you to be able to do so. You're speaking, and I'm thinking in my everyday when I go outside, I get my private art studio every time I
Oh,
look up in the sky.
I
Every
love
day,
that.
every day I look up and I say, I'll never see this same sky again. And that gives you an appreciation for life like nothing else.
Oh my gosh. That is beautiful. I had never thought of that. I had heard, oh my goodness, I don't know if you're a Disney fan, but Pocahontas years ago, there was a song and there was a lyric that I'm going to not quote correctly, but she says, You can't step in the same river twice. And you're saying the same thing to me. You're never going to see that same sky again. That's incredibly beautiful.
Oh, thank you, thank you. It really does ground me to what my day outlook will be. Although some days are harder than others, I can always reflect back to my first sight of the day, and so which happens to be my wife. And every time there is a very beautiful scene every day. Um,
Every
so folks, we'll have all that information to make sure that you can be able to get in contact with Anna and her services. But today's episode is sponsored by Fantail Services and Superpass, which are powering our website and app, Southern Sweet and Sassy Coffee, and Harchester, London. If you've enjoyed this episode and learned something interesting about the topic covered today, make sure to subscribe and let us know by leaving a comment. And we're always looking for new ideas and guests that we can add to our show. So if you know someone or have a topic that you would like for me to feature on the podcast, or would like to sponsor our show, we'd love to hear about it by emailing us at triadleadershipsolutions@gmail.com. And be sure to tune in next week for another episode where we dissect leadership from another angle. And as we like to end the show, success to you.